Hey, well, today we're talking about a bunch of rich jerks.
Wow. So we're still in this series about the parables of Jesus, and Jesus talks about the rich fool.
The rich fool.
Yeah. That's what we're talking about today on HC Daily.
You're listening to another episode of HC Daily, a daily devotional podcast that you can listen to at home or on the go. We believe that you can grow as much as you want to grow spiritually, and this podcast can be a part of your daily growth plan. So, whether you're watching on YouTube, listening on Spotify, or your favorite podcast app, we're glad you're here. Now, let's join our hosts, Jeff Forrester and Chris Zarbaugh, in the studio.
So, Jeff, normally when we record podcasts, they air later on.
Yeah, right.
So by the time
That's amazing. I've never recorded a podcast that aired before we recorded it.
Wow, that's not what I was
no, that's
trying
very
to.
profound.
I was setting the stage.
So you're kind of pulling the curtain back for our listeners to be able to go, wow, that's incredible. They record it and then it plays. That's amazing.
I meant weeks in advance.
Oh, I see.
Yes.
Yeah.
So,
Okay, I'm sorry.
so by the time they hear this, you will already have been at the, you'll be toward the end of your trip probably. But today,
I'll be in the middle. In the middle. Yeah.
So you're leaving what, today, tomorrow?
Tomorrow night. We're leaving tomorrow night.
So tell people real quick where you're going and why it's cool.
We are, well, everything I do is cool. I mean, that's just, yeah.
That's a stretch.
Yeah. We're going to Dubai, and I'll be in Dubai for about 4 or 5 days. And then we're going on from Dubai to Kathmandu, Nepal, and I'll be there about 5 days. Then we turn on and come home.
Yeah, and it's for TTI.
Yeah, for the Timothy Initiative's global church planning movement, and we're bringing in a bunch of our leaders from around the world to Dubai so that they begin to learn to connect and get to meet each other. And so a lot of times our global leaders want to communicate only through the U.S. offices. And since it's a global movement, we don't want it to be an American movement. And so we want the top leaders in the world to get to know each other well and share information with each other. So we're just going to encourage them, tell them they're doing a good job and get out of the way. And they're going to run their own conference. And then we're taking some of our donors, the ones who help make all the church planning thing happen, because we can plant a brand new church for $450. So we have a lot of people who say, hey, this is a big deal. I want to be a part of that. And some of our larger donors are going with us to go see it in the field, like proof of concept. And so that's why we're going on to Nepal, is to go see what God's doing there. So
That's very cool. Yeah, so just so you know, the next time you go to Dubai, it is on my bucket list.
Is it?
Yes.
Yeah. Have you been there before?
No.
Oh, it's pretty incredible.
I'm very jealous and yeah.
Well, I had a choice between taking you or taking my wife, Bonnie, and she won. So that's how that worked.
And that's all I have to say about that.
Yeah. So
she should win.
At Heritage, our senior leadership never travels overnight alone. And so we always take staff or whatever, and that's usually how it works. But on this one, I decided to take my wife because we have some other pastors' wives that are going. And so
cool.
On this trip, so I thought it'd be good to take her.
Very cool.
So yeah, be neat. So Dubai, I'll put it on your list, man. I'll get you there.
Yep.
Good.
Thanks.
Well, we are in Luke chapter 12, and we're continuing to read these stories, these parables. The idea of a parable is that Jesus takes an earthly story and he gives us a heavenly or a godly application to it. So that's what it's about. So we're reading today in chapter 12 of the book of Luke, and starting in verse 13. And it just says, "Then someone called from the crowd, 'Teacher, please tell my brother to divide our father's estate with me.' And Jesus replied, 'Friend, who made me a judge over you to decide such things as that?' And then he said, 'Beware, guard against every kind of greed. Life's not measured by how much you own.' And then he told them a story. A rich man had a fertile farm that produced fine crops. And he said to himself, 'What should I do? I don't have room for all my crops.' And then he said, 'I know, I'll tear down my barns and build bigger ones. And then I'll have room enough to store all my wheat and other goods. And I'll sit back and say to myself, my friend, you have enough stored away for years to come. Now take it easy, eat, drink, and be merry.' But God said to him, 'You fool, you will die this very night. And then you'll get everything. And then who will get everything you worked for?' Yes, a person is a fool to store up earthly wealth, but not have a rich relationship with God."
There it is.
Yeah, man.
Yeah, so Jesus is not saying that financial planning is bad, right? People say, well, I have to plan for retirement. I have to save up. I have to. That's not what he's saying at all. And the reason why we know this is because at the very beginning, he is speaking into one particular individual, and he very much uses the word greed. Beware and guard against every kind of greed. Life is not measured. That term, life is not measured. That's the operative phrase. He's trying to teach bad priorities. So financial planning isn't bad. Jesus just knew this man's heart.
Yeah.
This man's heart was greedy.
Yeah.
Isn't it amazing how so many parables in the Bible where Jesus spoke into what they were thinking?
Yes.
Not parables, but stories.
Yeah.
Right. Where Jesus knew what they were thinking, so he spoke up and said, so that you know that the Son of Man has the power to forgive sins.
Right.
Rise up and walk.
Right.
Because it says he knew what they were thinking in their hearts.
That's right.
And so it is one of those things where the man wasn't just coming and he had his priorities straight and everything was fine in his heart. Jesus said to him, I'm not a judge to do that. That's not my position. And then he said, guard against all kinds of greed. So we know that this man had his life not right-sized.
Yeah. Unpack the word greed. Define greed.
Yeah. Well,
because that's a big one.
It is.
And so let me give a background on this. So typically, the oldest brother would inherit either everything or he'd inherit twice as much as the next brother, right? He'd get a double portion. So in this situation, this isn't probably the older brother. This would be a brother that either got nothing or got hardly anything compared to the older brother. And he's saying, it doesn't seem fair to me that my brother has it and I don't have it. I want it. And he wants to use, which it would be common for Jewish people to go to a rabbi and ask the rabbi to kind of adjudicate a circumstance rather than taking the time and the money to go to court. So you go to a rabbi, they trust the rabbi. So they go to Jesus on this one. That's why I said, hey, I'm not the judge. It's not my business. I'm not here to adjudicate civil laws, lawsuit kind of things. So this guy feels like he's been treated unfairly. And he's saying, would you help me out? And Jesus immediately warns him about greed. So what is greed and to what level is this guy being greedy? Right.
Well, I mean, as far as this guy goes, we don't know if he's the younger brother, but that would make the most sense.
Yeah, well, culturally, that very likely would be it.
Yeah, because he said
because an older brother isn't going to say, hey, my younger brother won't share the inheritance with me.
Right, and then he says, divide it with me.
Right.
In other words, like implying that he's excluded.
Yes.
Right.
Yeah.
So yeah, most likely that's probably the case. Greed at its form, I don't have a clinical definition or anything like that, but I would just say it's all about me. It's me first. It is when you put your needs, wants, wishes above anything else, and mostly God, right? So when Jesus talks about greed, a lot of times it's with money, obviously, but to be honest, greed comes in all sorts of forms. I was singles pastor for years and years. I even before I moved to Michigan, for about 3.5 years, I did college ministry and I was over singles. And then I came to Michigan and I was like 2.5 years with singles. And what's interesting is in that world, you deal with a lot of relational tension, like breakups and divorces and things like this. And when you get burned, you end up living your life selfishly. Because what you don't do is you don't put yourself out there like we're called to. And to believe it or not, you live your life. It's a form of greed. It's super hard to recognize.
Yeah.
But what you're saying is like, hey, I should have took care of me last time and nobody looked out for me. So I'm going to live my life and I'm going to look out for me first in this relationship. And what ends up being is you end up acting selfish. And so people, they try to identify that. And
so you're saying the root of greed is narcissism. It's an obsession with yourself.
Sure. I mean, it doesn't have to feel like extreme narcissism.
Sure.
I think it's a form of narcissism, right? But in the end, though, I think it's the heart of greed is when you put yourself and you look out for yourself more than anything or anyone, and to the point, especially when it's wrong.
Yeah.
Right. So greed is oftentimes used when people go overboard looking out for themselves.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I was thinking about that as I was going through this passage, thinking about defying greed, because it doesn't seem unreasonable to me that this guy says, I feel cheated.
Right.
Right? That doesn't seem unreasonable.
Right.
Although, as we've gone through other parables of Jesus and as you read through the teachings of Jesus, Jesus almost never references the concept of fairness. So fairness is not part of real life, right? Life is unfair, fundamentally unfair. It's not fair. I was thinking about this, the Pokot people, we spend a lot of money, a lot of resources to help dig wells in northwest Kenya because there's no water. And so many of their babies die before they turn 5 years old that the mothers often don't even name their babies. It's because of waterborne diseases or no water, all those kinds of things. And then I was just out on Lake Huron. A friend of mine has a place on Lake Huron, which is one of the largest lakes in the world. Then I was thinking, Michigan is surrounded by 20% of all of the fresh water on the planet. That's not fair. But I didn't choose to live here. I just won the cosmic lottery. I was born here, but I didn't choose it. Life is fundamentally unfair. Life always has struggles and difficulties, and things don't turn out right for all of us all the time, right? And so it's not fair. So Jesus never references the idea of fairness, but this guy comes and goes, I think things are not fair. My brother's taking advantage of me. And Jesus goes, well, I'll be careful with greed. So I was trying to think through greed. The worst of greed, in my mind, leads to me being completely jealous of everybody and everything, everybody who has more than me, because I want more and more. Greed on its surface and at its core really is about, I want more stuff, I want more money, right? That would be really it.
Which feels like the opposite of contentment.
Yes, and I was going to say the exact opposite. If there's a scale, the exact opposite of that is contentment. So what is Jesus warning against greed? Most of us think, well, it's not my level of dissatisfaction. That's not greedy. That's just reasonable.
Right.
But I know a guy who's greedy, right? Most of us never think of ourselves as greedy. I've never had a person say, you know what my real sin is? My struggle is greed. I've never heard anybody tell me that.
Yeah, it's pretty rare, that's for sure.
Right, and it's because we always think, well, my desire for more is the right amount of a desire for more. So I think the simplest definition of greed would be the desire for more. The extreme version of it would be an obsession for more. But anything other than contentment, one level up from that, is the beginning of greed. And Jesus is warning about everything that's not contentment, just being content with what God has for you. And so then he shifts into, okay, let's talk about a guy who's obsessed with building wealth. He doesn't care about poor people. He's not thinking about how to use his wealth for other people. He's only thinking about wealth for his own pleasure. And that might be kind of the definition Jesus is talking here. This young man's not coming in saying, hey, I really think that our Father intended to have it split between the two of us, and I just want to do the right thing. I want to be able to use it because my family, needs it for the necessities of life or whatever. Jesus seems to be saying, I know this guy's heart, and basically what he says is, I just want more so I have more pleasure. Because the story he tells is a guy who's just building more wealth purely for pleasure, because he says, now that I built my barns, I'm going to sit back, eat, drink, and be merry. And God goes, you're such a fool, right? Because you wasted your whole life on something that doesn't matter. Sitting back, eat, drinking, and being merry just doesn't matter.
Right. Yeah, and it's not like that's a negative thing in itself.
No.
It's the encompassing
If that's
principle.
the goal, it's negative.
Right.
If that's the goal of your life, that's negative.
Right. Because Ecclesiastes actually does tell us to enjoy life and eat, drink, and be merry. So in itself, that's not a bad thing. But at the same time, what he's really saying is he's painting a picture of a man. If you think about it, he's working his entire life to get more and more and more and more and more. Yeah. Because he says, oh, finally, now that I have more, I've built bigger barns, and now I'm going to go ahead and basically retire. He says, you didn't know this, but your life ends this very night. Right. And then he asks this question: then who will get everything you worked for? You know what the answer to that question is? Somebody else.
Somebody else, yeah. You're not taking it with you.
Right.
That's what Jesus is saying.
Right.
Yeah, the old adage, you never see a U-Haul behind a hearse.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Right. So a fool to stir up earthly wealth but not have a rich relationship with God, that's the key. Yeah. He's not saying that financial planning is bad. He's saying sacrificing your relationship with God, sacrificing, a life of blessing, investing in eternal things versus earthly things, spending your entire life just for accumulation of wealth, all of that is wrong-sized. Yeah. So that's why I believe that the man asking needed to hear that, because so many times Jesus either tells a parable or tells a story, and it's because he knows the heart of the person asking. That's right. So yeah, I mean, this is basically a reminder for you and for me that every time I wake up and I think about, my retirement, like I don't really have much of a retirement. I'm going to be a Walmart greeter, all these different things. And I worry about what's going to happen and everything else. I just have to remind myself, listen, I could only do what I can do I could be wise, and I could try to, plan my financial future. But at the same time, in the end, my life is a blip and eternity is forever. So the things that I do for God, that really should be the highest priority.
Right. Well, Solomon teaches us in the book of Proverbs. He talks about the value of preparing for our old age and of storing for our old age. Solomon also tells us that a godly person leaves an inheritance to his children's children. So now that's not just providing for your retirement, that's building wealth for the sake of generational wealth that you pass on.
Right.
That's a biblical principle. It's a good concept. I think it's something we should apply. A godly person does that. I think his purpose here is different. His purpose, I think, is triggered in verse 19. He says, I'll sit back and say to myself, my friend, you have enough stored away for years to come. Now take it easy.
Right.
One of the 10 commandments, is the Sabbath day commandment is man shall work 6 days, and on the seventh day you should rest. And this guy decided, I'm just going to indulge, and I choose not to be productive anymore. So, that doesn't mean you shouldn't retire. That just means you should always have a plan to be productive.
Right.
Right? Use your life. And this guy's like, I'm just going to indulge. I've collected all these things. It's just for me. My wealth is for me. My comfort is for me. And I'm not caring about anything or anybody. I'm just going to do my thing, and I'm going to enjoy life. That is a wasted life every time. So just because you come to the end of the career that you have doesn't mean that it's wrong for you to golf a little more and to be retired. But man, you need to find a cause. You need to live your life where you get up in the morning and you're producing, you're making a difference in the world. And that might be your grandchildren. That might be, but you have to have a cause. Don't just sit around, watch TV and play golf and think that that's the purpose of life for the last 20 years.
Right.
But a lot of people think that's it. If I can just get to the point where I don't have to work and don't have to do anything anymore, then that's the goal.
Right.
And Jesus is saying, God's going to say, that's waste. That's a waste of time. And at that point, he calls that guy's number. He said, tonight's the night.
Right.
Because we all have an appointment.
And there's nothing wrong with those days occasionally where we indulge ourselves and make it all about us.
Well, 6 days work, 1 day rest.
Right.
Yeah, so there is a rest built into the pattern that God wants for humanity.
So my mom is 83.
Yeah.
And she's probably listening to the podcast.
Yeah.
She got that link. And so
Hi, Mom.
Yeah, right. Hi, Mom.
We're sure you tried with Chris.
So the idea is this: she still works.
Yeah. Oh wow, that's a good one. Yeah.
No, so not saying that working when you're 83 is a good thing. It's not. But the one benefit that she is hanging on to is she's still incredibly strong.
Yeah.
She's incredibly healthy.
Yeah.
But she also has a purpose.
Mm-hmm.
And so I'm not anti-retirement. Please don't think that.
No.
And I'm not thinking that you should always work. I'm not saying that. All I'm saying is this: is that life beyond retirement should always have a purpose. In her case, she works. That's beside the fact. But the fact that she gets up every day, and you know what she does? She actually she's a caregiver inside a home, so she takes care of people older than her.
Oh, wow. That's cool. Yeah.
So she does the laundry and she does the dishes.
Oh, Chrissy, I just work with all these old people.
Right. Yeah. They're so old, And so,
I don't know that's how your mom talks.
No, she sort of, I guess. Mm-hmm. But she is, but she's serving others, right?
Yeah.
And she's staying strong and she gets up every day and she has a purpose. And I think that whether you work or not, having a purpose after retirement is the reason why people live longer.
Absolutely. Yeah. You keep your mind sharper. Mm-hmm. You're staying engaged with ideas. You're physically having to move around, standing on your feet, all that kind of stuff. We are made to work. We're made to produce. God made us to work in the garden. Yeah. Even in God's version of paradise, before sin broke everything, God's plan was for us to work.
Yeah. Well, he gave Adam an assignment.
Right. That's right.
And to take care of the garden.
Yeah.
Work the garden.
And so I think that.
And name the animals.
That's right. And chase Eve around. Those were his 3 jobs. So Jesus is not saying it's wrong to retire. Solomon said, prepare for your old age, all those kinds of things. Absolutely. Those are all important. I just want to encourage everybody not to think that the goal is to stop doing stuff. I produced until I was 62, or I produced until I was 67, and now it's just only about me. I'm going to indulge.
Yeah.
If that's your goal in life, even in your 30s and 40s, your goal is to retire someday and not do anything, you're going to be wasting what could be the most important years of your life. Now you've got wisdom. Now you have the ability to encourage. And then once you get past your working years, your career years, now you have free time to enjoy, to do the things you want to do, but you also have free time to do things for your family and for others in the community that, to volunteer or whatever, that otherwise you didn't have time to do. And maybe all the rest of your life has been building up the wealth to be able to be free from a job so that you can give your life to make the biggest difference. Maybe your greatest ministry will be in your retirement years.
Yeah. So if we were to wrap up and actually speak into our listeners, those who are retired, we would say, find a purpose if you don't have one.
Exactly. Your greatest ministry years can be right now.
Those who are in my age and your age who are nervous about a retirement, perhaps, or maybe overconsumed about planning or worried, or maybe in their 40s as well, we would say, just keep it right-sized. The fact that, doing significant things for God is what matters most.
Right. It's not ungodly to prepare for the future. So you should make some sacrifices, get a second job, whatever. Prepare for your future. It's not an ungodly thing. It's a godly thing. A wise person does that. Don't worry about it. Right. Trust God. And then understand Jesus is saying the most important thing is to have a rich relationship with God.
Right. And then I would say for all of us at any age, just understand the danger of greed.
Right. The value of contentment.
Yeah, the value of contentment and the danger of greed. So let's walk away today thinking about being content.
Yeah.
Being grateful for what we have, what God has given to us. Recognize our blessings that we have every day.
Yeah.
Just like you said, being born in the country, winning the cosmic lottery. Thankful for our health. And even though we all have challenges, and every single one of us, we don't have a perfect life. We all have our things to deal with every single day. To be content because God's grace is enough.
That's good.
All right. Well, we'll see you next time on HC Daily.
Thank you for joining us today. If you enjoyed this podcast, please help us spread the word by liking this episode and sharing it on your social media platforms. Be sure to leave a comment and review, and don't forget to give us 5 stars. When you do, you help us reach even more people who need a daily devotional like HC Daily. If you'd like to hear more from Chris and Jeff, they're both teaching pastors at Heritage Church, located in Southeast Michigan. You can get more of their messages by clicking on the Messages tab at heritagechurch.com. Be sure to join us again soon for another episode of HC Daily.